Daniel Reeves had always been careful, calculated. After spending a decade crammed in overpriced city apartments, he finally closed on a 3-bedroom house tucked deep in a clean, upscale cul-de-sac in Cedar Glen Estates, a neighborhood so obsessively pristine, even the squirrels looked regulated. The lawn was perfect. The neighbors waved politely. The house was exactly what he wanted. Secluded enough to feel private, but close enough to amenities that he didn't feel cut off. It had a wide backyard with a solid deck and a big oak tree that arched just right over the property line. It was the kind of place you could grow old in, or so he thought. The first red flag came exactly 12 hours after moving in. He was sipping coffee at dawn, enjoying the rare silence, when he saw a woman in a pantsuit standing on the sidewalk, just staring into his backyard, clipboard in hand, not moving, not pacing, just watching. Daniel leaned closer to the window. She raised her phone and took a photo. Weird. He opened the sliding door. "Can I help you?" She blinked, startled, then smiled like she'd been caught stealing candy. "Oh, just admiring the lot lines. You're Daniel, right? Welcome to Cedar Glen. I'm Meredith Voss, HOA president. Nice to meet you," Daniel said warily. "Anything wrong?" No, she said, tucking the clipboard behind her back. "Just conducting a routine lot evaluation. Every time a new resident moves in, we make sure everything complies with our lovely HOA standards. Enjoy your coffee." She gave him a cheerful wave and walked briskly away. That should have been the end of it, but the next day, it got weirder. Daniel found a gold-trimmed envelope on his doormat. No stamp, no address, just his name, Mr. Daniel Reeves. Inside was a thick wedding invitation, rose-colored with embossed lettering, and silver ribbon laced through the cardstock. "You are joyfully invited to the union of Chloe Voss and Brandon Tully. Saturday, June 14th, at 4 p.m. 140A Cedar Glen Lane, backyard. Garden reception to follow on-site." Daniel blinked. That was his address. He checked the date. The wedding was in 2 weeks. Assuming it was a typo or a prank, he laughed it off and tossed the invite on the kitchen counter. But over the next few days, neighbors began stopping him on his walks. "Can't wait to see the decorations you're putting up," said one woman with a casserole dish. "Such a generous thing, opening your yard like that," an older man added with a wink. Daniel was polite at first, until he saw a landscaping crew trimming his hedges without permission. One guy was hammering decorative stakes into the ground. "Hey!" Daniel shouted, rushing outside. "Who told you to do this?" "Work order from the HOA," the man replied. "Prepping for the Voss wedding." "What the hell are you talking about? This is my property." The man shrugged and kept working. "Take it up with Meredith." Daniel's stomach tightened. His hands balled into fists. This wasn't a typo. This wasn't a mistake. This was something much worse. He stormed back inside, heart pounding. A wedding. At his house. Without permission. Who did these people think they were? He stared out the window as a second crew arrived. This one wheeling in tents. Daniel Reeves had moved here for peace and privacy. Instead, it looked like he'd become ground zero for the most outrageous HOA invasion imaginable, and they hadn't even knocked on his door. Daniel didn't waste time. The moment the landscaping trucks pulled away, he marched down to the HOA office, barely remembering to grab the envelope with the wedding invite as evidence. His boots hit the marble-tiled floor like gunshots as he approached the glass reception window. "I need to speak to Meredith. Now." The receptionist, a woman with unnaturally perfect posture and a frozen smile, didn't even blink. "Do you have an appointment, Mr. Reeves?" Yeah, he said, slapping the wedding invitation on the counter. This says I'm hosting a wedding in 2 weeks. That seems like a pretty good reason to talk. The receptionist's smile never faltered. One moment, please. A minute later, Meredith Voss opened the frosted glass door to her office and gestured him in. The room was meticulously decorated, cream-colored walls, a single orchid in a sleek vase, and plaques commemorating HOA excellence over the years. It smelled faintly of citrus and power. Daniel, she said with theatrical warmth. So, glad you dropped by. I was going to call you later today. Cut the small talk, Daniel snapped. Why is there a wedding planned at my house? She chuckled, as if he were a child who didn't understand how lemonade stands worked. It's really quite simple. The park was booked. Then there was that unfortunate plumbing mishap. And Chloe, my niece, has dreamed of a backyard wedding her whole life. Your home just happened to be the most, shall we say, aesthetically compatible. You mean it has a flat lawn and no dogs? Daniel growled. That doesn't give you the right. Oh, but it does, Meredith interrupted, pulling out a thick HOA binder from her drawer. She flipped casually to a tab, labeled Emergency Provisions, and tapped her French manicured nail on a highlighted passage. Article 9, subsection C. In the event of unforeseen circumstances preventing the use of community property, the HOA may designate temporary use of private property, within reason, for neighborhood benefit, provided written notice is delivered. Daniel stared at her. You left a wedding invitation, not a legal notice. She gave a sympathetic smile. Well, it was very nicely printed, wasn't it? He stood. I don't care what your little binder says. I didn't agree to this. I'm not hosting a wedding. Her smile faded, just slightly, like a mask slipping. Daniel, let me be clear. This is a community-focused neighborhood. Your cooperation is expected. The entire board voted unanimously, and all the arrangements are in motion. Refusing now would not only be considered hostile, but may also affect your standing with the HOA. Daniel narrowed his eyes. Are you threatening me? Not at all. She tilted her head like a bird, examining a worm. Just reminding you that non-compliance has consequences. After all, don't you still need approval for your fence permit? He stared at her in disbelief. Meredith leaned back, satisfied. Besides, it's just one day. You let some people walk through your yard, listen to a little music, and you're the neighborhood darling. Everyone wins. Daniel clenched his fists. Not everyone. As he walked out, the receptionist gave him a congratulatory thumbs up. Hope the catering's good. He didn't respond. Outside, the wedding coordinator was already setting up chalkboard signs on the sidewalk, scribbling, Welcome to the Yus Voss Tully wedding. Daniel walked past her without a word, jaw tight, blood boiling. He wasn't just being ignored. He was being railroaded. The HOA thought they owned him. Meredith thought she'd won, but she had no idea what Daniel was planning next. Daniel double-checked every lock on his doors. Before bed that night, he felt violated. Like the walls of his home weren't thick enough to block out the smug control of Meredith Voss and her clipboard mafia. The HOA had crossed a line, and tomorrow he would draw his own. But sometime during the night, that line got erased. He was jolted awake at 6:03 a.m. by a low thunk, thunk, thunk that echoed through the floorboards. Groggy and barefoot, he stumbled toward the sliding door and froze. Floodlights lit up the backyard like a film set. A team of workers was hammering stakes into the lawn. Massive tent frames were going up. Tables with white tablecloths were being wheeled in. A catering van was parked halfway up his driveway. Daniel flung the door open. Hey, what the hell do you think you're doing? A guy in a headset, glanced at him like Daniel had just interrupted a Broadway rehearsal. "You're supposed to be inside, sir. Please don't disrupt setup." Disrupt. This is my house. He stormed into the yard, dodging a woman stringing fairy lights across the oak tree. "Who told you to do this?" "HOA authorization." The man replied, "It's all in the schedule. Stage installs at 8, floral delivery at 9, rehearsal at noon." "I didn't authorize anything," Daniel growled. That's when he saw her. Meredith stood by the catering truck, coffee in hand, calmly inspecting a clipboard. She was dressed like she owned a vineyard, white blouse, tan slacks, and the eternal smugness of someone who'd already won the argument before it began. "Meredith!" She turned, beamed. "Daniel, isn't it lovely? They're ahead of schedule." "You broke into my yard." No, she said sweetly. "Your side gate was unlocked, and technically, per our agreement," she tapped her clipboard, "we're within legal bounds to begin non-destructive setup 72 hours in advance." Daniel's mouth dropped. "Non-destructive? You've got people driving spikes into my lawn. They'll be removed carefully." She took a delicate sip of her coffee. "We even brought turf patches to restore any wear. You'll hardly notice." "I didn't agree to this. You didn't have to. The board did." Daniel's hands were shaking now. "You don't have the right." She stepped closer, voice dropping to a private, knife-edged tone. "Daniel, you're new here. I understand that, but Cedar Glen thrives on cooperation. We don't like conflict, and people who create conflict tend to find life here unpleasant." He stared at her. "Is that a threat?" "It's advice," she said, smiling again. "You could be known as the gracious new neighbor who hosted a beautiful wedding, or the bitter recluse who ruined his own reputation. Either way, the event's happening. The only question is, are you going to be part of the problem? Or just stay out of the way?" She walked off before he could respond. By 9 a.m., his backyard looks like a wedding magazine. Folding chairs lined the lawn in neat white rows. A string quartet was practicing in the corner. Floral arrangements in crystal vases were being positioned beside the oak tree. Guests were already stopping by to peek in, smiling, waving like it was all perfectly normal. Daniel closed the door, trembling with anger. He tried calling the police, again, but they dismissed it as a civil dispute. "If you didn't say no in writing," the officer said, "the HOA can argue implied consent." Implied consent? Daniel stared out the window. This wasn't a wedding anymore. This was a siege, and if they wanted a battle, they'd get one. Daniel sat in his garage, eyes red from lack of sleep, laptop glowing faintly on the workbench. Around him were boxes he still hadn't unpacked, half-assembled shelves, and a row of old demolition permits from his last job as a structural engineer. He was tired, but something inside him had clicked over. They'd started this. Now he was done playing fair. He scoured every HOA document he'd been given during the closing, then went deeper. Public records, court filings, property deeds, zoning ordinances, anything that might crack open the pristine armor of Cedar Glen Estates. And finally, at 3:42 a.m., he found it, buried in the original Cedar Glen Charter. Written 30 years ago, long before the Meredith era, was a clause so obscure it didn't even appear in the summary documents. Daniel only found it because he cross-referenced the subdivision's original founding documents with old utility layouts. Clause 17D. In the event of temporary annexation of a private lot for public or communal use, the owner reserves the right to perform structural land modification so long as it poses no immediate threat to health or life and does not impact adjacent lots. Daniel reread it 5 times. Structural land modification. That could mean almost anything, including excavation or demolition. A plan formed in his mind, sharp and brutal. By 6:00 a.m., he was standing in his driveway as a flatbed truck rolled in carrying an old but powerful Bobcat mini excavator, rented from a contractor friend who didn't ask questions. A few neighbors blinked from their porches, coffee mugs frozen mid-sip. Someone called out, "Everything okay?" Daniel just smiled and nodded. "Yup, just making a few modifications." He signed the waiver and backed the Bobcat down the ramp with surgical precision. His fingers gripped the controls like they were wired to his bloodstream. It wasn't just about wrecking a wedding anymore. This was about proving that he wasn't. A pawn on their board. He started in the center of the yard. The scoop bit into the earth with a satisfying crunch. Grass, sod, soil, lifted in chunks. He worked fast, scooping out a rough square pit, nearly 4 feet deep. The white folding chairs were shoved aside, cracking like twigs. One of the vases shattered beneath the treads. The string quartet's spot was reduced to churned mud. Within 20 minutes, his once manicured lawn looked like an excavation site from a zombie movie. The sound drew them in like flies. First came Meredith, running, clipboard clutched to her chest like it could shield her from bulldozers. Behind her were Chloe, the bride-to-be, and Brandon, a lanky man with a Bluetooth headset and a look of slow dawning horror. "What are you doing?" Meredith shrieked. Daniel shut off the engine and climbed out calmly. "Making structural modifications. Per HOA Charter Clause 17D. Would you like a copy?" She blinked like he'd slapped her. "You're destroying the wedding venue." "I'm modifying my property," he said, "in a way that doesn't endanger life or neighboring lots. Perfectly legal." Brandon looked at the crater. "Where are the tents supposed to go?" Daniel walked past them, wiping dirt from his hands. "Maybe in the sewer drain. That's where this whole idea belongs." "You'll regret this," Meredith hissed. "We will sue you for everything." Daniel turned to her, calm and deadly. "Funny, I was about to say the same." He walked back inside as a light rain began to fall. Outside, the dream wedding was collapsing. Chairs overturned, flower petals soaked, tents sagging into the churned earth. And Daniel. He sat down with a fresh coffee, and the HOA's original founding charter spread before him like a war map. They had no idea how deep this was going to go. By noon, Daniel's lawn was a battlefield, and Meredith Voss was marching into it like Napoleon in a pantsuit. He spotted her through the blinds, flanked by 2 men in stiff grey suits, carrying briefcases and the unmistakable air of courtrooms, arrogance. Behind them, a crowd of neighbours had begun to gather, some curious, others filming on their phones. The wedding setup was gone now. All that remained was a pit of churned-up mud and half a tent pole sticking out like a broken bone. Daniel opened the front door before they could knock. "Daniel Reeves," said the taller lawyer. "I'm Jeffrey Pennington, representing the Cedar Glen Homeowners Association. This is a formal cease and desist. You are to halt all destructive activity on HOA-aligned property immediately." Daniel raised an eyebrow. "HOA-aligned? You mean my yard?" The area was under temporary annexation for communal use. The second lawyer cut in. "Per Article 9, subsection C. We also have documents stating you did not file formal opposition within the required window." "Let me guess," Daniel said, crossing his arms. "That window was the 48 hours between me receiving a wedding invitation and waking up to tents in my yard." Jeffrey nodded smugly. "That's correct." Daniel smiled and stepped aside. Good, come in. They hesitated. Lawyers didn't like entering enemy territory without clear advantage. But Meredith gave a curt nod, and they filed inside. Daniel led them into his living room, where a laptop sat open on the coffee table. He turned the screen toward them, revealing scanned documents, email threads, and 2 blurry PDFs stamped with a county seal. "What's this?" Meredith asked, frowning. Daniel pointed to one file. "This is a copy of the original Cedar Glen Charter, before your administration updated it. Buried in there is Clause 17D, giving homeowners full rights to perform structural modifications if their property is commandeered for communal use." That clause was revoked, Meredith said quickly. "Actually, no," Daniel replied. "The summary bylaws you distributed say it was omitted for brevity. It was never formally removed from the original charter on file with the county, which makes it legally binding." The lawyers exchanged a glance. "And here," Daniel said, opening another document, "is something even juicier. A 2011 audit filed after Cedar Glen misused reserve funds to build the original community fountain using a no-bid contract awarded to your brother-in-law's landscaping firm. County flagged it as improper spending, but you settled before it hit court." Meredith's face drained of color. Daniel leaned in, voice low and sharp. "You've been laundering neighborhood funds through shell companies for years. I also found a few friendly emails between you and Councilman Reed. You know, the ones where he fast-tracked your cousin's permit application while stalling mine." The silence thickened. "I've sent everything to a lawyer of my own," Daniel added, "and the county's ethics board. You think you're untouchable because you run a suburban HOA, but all it takes is one person with time and teeth to tear it down." Jeffrey cleared his throat. This is outside the scope of this complaint." "Then file another one," Daniel snapped. "But as of now, this wedding is dead, and if I hear one more word about permits, fines, or community spirit, I'll make sure this entire neighborhood knows exactly how deep your corruption goes." Meredith stood frozen. For the first time, her eyes weren't smug. They were afraid. "You made this personal," Daniel said. "Now it's mine." As they left in silence, Daniel felt the neighborhood watching. Silent, curious, a little afraid. He didn't care. The storm wasn't over. It was just beginning. By 2 p.m., the wedding guests began to arrive. Dressed in pastel gowns and pressed suits, stepping out of luxury SUVs and rental limos, with confusion on their faces. What was supposed to be a picture-perfect suburban ceremony had turned into a surreal construction site. The white tent was gone. The chairs were gone. In their place stood a deep, muddy pit, a parked excavator, and a large hand-painted sign Daniel had nailed to a tree that read, "Private property. Trespassers will be towed and sued." From his porch, Daniel sipped iced coffee and watched it all unfold. Chloe, the bride, stepped onto his walkway in her wedding dress, makeup flawless, hair curled into careful spirals. She froze when she saw the crater where the altar was supposed to be. Meredith Voss followed close behind, her expression brittle. "Don't panic," she whispered to Chloe. "It's just a hiccup. We'll move it to the front lawn." "No," Daniel said loudly from the porch. "You won't." The crowd turned. Daniel stood and walked to the edge of his porch, raising his phone. "This is a private residence. No one here has permission to enter this property. Any further intrusion will be documented and forwarded to law enforcement." "Smile for the camera." He waved his phone slowly, panning across the confused, muttering crowd. "You've ruined this," Chloe cried. "This was supposed to be our day." Daniel looked at her calmly. "Then you should have rented a venue instead of stealing someone's backyard." Her fiancé, Brandon, jogged up behind her, wringing his hands. "Dude, come on. It's just a few hours. You can't seriously be this petty." Daniel stepped off the porch. You and your fiancé, along with the entire HOA, thought you could bulldoze over me. Literally. You installed a wedding on my lawn without consent. You had me investigated. And when I pushed back, you tried to sick lawyers on me. You want petty? Fine, let me show you petty. He tapped a button on his phone. A loud beep 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 echoed through the yard. Everyone turned toward the street as a massive dump truck reversed up Daniel's driveway. A second later, its bed tilted, and a mountain of crushed rock and gravel poured out into the front yard, burying the last flat surface under 2 tons of jagged fill. Gasps filled the air. "What are you doing?" Meredith shrieked. Daniel smiled. "Grading for drainage. Clause 17D. Remember, structural modification. I didn't want the mud from the backyard to reach the foundation." The truck driver gave a lazy salute, threw it into gear, and rolled away. Brandon ran to the pile. "You just dumped a rock slide on your own property." "No," Daniel said. "My property. And this rock slide just made it impossible to set up anything, unless you want guests twisting their ankles." The crowd was already dispersing, murmuring, shaking heads. One older guest muttered, "I knew something was fishy about all this," before leaving in her heels, carefully sidestepping the gravel mound. Chloe looked like she might cry. Daniel turned to her, softer now. "I'm sorry your day got ruined, but it wasn't me who ruined it. It was the woman who told you she could override consent." He nodded toward Meredith. The bride's eyes followed his gaze, and something in her expression shifted. She turned and walked away, slowly, her train dragging in the dirt. Meredith stood alone, fists clenched, trembling. For once, no clipboard, no allies, just a crater, a gravel mound, and the shattered illusion of control. Daniel stood there, heart pounding. He hadn't just stopped a wedding, he'd sent a message. 3 days passed. The chaos had settled, but the fallout was just beginning. Daniel's phone buzzed constantly. Calls from reporters, curious neighbors, even anonymous tips. The viral video of the wedding guests retreating from his gravel-covered yard had been posted by a teenager across the street. It already had 2.4 million views, titled, "Groom's Wedding Destroyed by HOA Nemesis." Meredith had gone quiet, but Daniel knew that silence wasn't surrender. It was strategy. And sure enough, on the morning of the 4th day, an official-looking envelope arrived by courier. Daniel tore it open and read the letter, his jaw clenched. It was a notice of property reassessment and fine escalation. The HOA now claimed that Daniel's unauthorized landscaping violated updated zoning aesthetic requirements. The fines? $1,200 per day, retroactive to the moment the excavation began. Total due, $4,800, and climbing. Attached was a threat, pay up, or face foreclosure procedures under the HOA's binding covenant authority. They weren't just retaliating. They were trying to take his house. Daniel didn't panic. He grabbed a notepad, drove straight to the county recorder's office, and asked for everything related to Lot 700A7B, his plot. The clerk looked skeptical, but eventually brought out a dusty cardboard file from the back room. The first few pages were standard. Closing disclosures, signature acknowledgements, plat maps. But then Daniel found something odd. A handwritten amendment stapled to the back of a faded page. It was dated 1997, signed by the original owner, and notarized. The header read, "Special Severance Deed. Pre-annexation parcel protection." Daniel's eyes widened. The document stated that Lot 187B was originally part of an unincorporated section that was never legally absorbed into the Cedar Glen HOA. The developer had attempted to include it retroactively, but the original owner had refused. And since no new vote was ever recorded, the deed still stood. Daniel's lot was never legally part of the HOA. They had no authority over him, no right to fine him, no jurisdiction, no annexation powers, nothing. They'd been bluffing the entire time. He photocopied everything, drove home, and didn't bother knocking when he walked into the HOA office building. The staffers stared as he marched past their desks and threw the documents down on Meredith's desk with a hollow thud. She looked up, tired, pale, a flicker of panic behind her perfectly plucked eyebrows. Daniel leaned forward. "You're done." She glanced at the papers. "What is this?" "A severance deed," he interrupted. "Filed in 1997, legally recorded. Lot 187B was never brought under HOA authority. You've been issuing illegal fines, applying unlawful policies, and misrepresenting your power." He pulled out a second set of papers. "And I've already filed a motion with the county auditor to audit every fine you've issued in the last 10 years. If even one other home was misclassified, like mine, you're looking at a class action lawsuit that'll bankrupt Cedar Glen." Meredith stared at him, speechless. Daniel smiled coldly. "I'm not just coming for your clipboard. I'm coming for your crown." As he left, the silence in the room felt like a held breath waiting to explode. Outside, the wind shifted. Neighbors watched him now with something new in their eyes. Not just curiosity or fear, respect. The man who stood alone against the system and found the crack in its foundation. But it wasn't over yet. The final battle was coming, and Daniel was ready. The sun hung low in the sky as Daniel stepped onto his front porch, a calm settling over him that he hadn't felt since the chaos began. The HOA's threats, the lawsuits, the viral videos, all had faded into a distant hum. Today, the fight was nearly won. The county auditor had confirmed the truth. The special severance deed was real. The HOA had no legal authority over his property. The fines were invalid. The foreclosure threats baseless. News crews arrived, cameras poised to capture Daniel's victory. Neighbors gathered, some nodding respectfully, others whispering apologies for doubting him. Meredith Voss stood at the edge of the crowd, stripped of her usual confidence. Eyes wary but unreadable, Daniel cleared his throat. "I want to thank everyone here today," he began, voice steady. "This wasn't just about one wedding, one lawn, or one man. It was about standing up to a system that believed it could silence and control us." Cheers rose, but before anyone could celebrate, Meredith stepped forward. "I have a confession," she said, voice trembling but clear. "There's more to this story than you know." A hush fell. She glanced down, then back up at Daniel. "The HOA wasn't trying to take your house because we wanted power over you. We were protecting the neighborhood." Daniel frowned. "Protecting it from what?" She swallowed. "From a developer, one who's been quietly buying lots nearby, planning to build a massive commercial complex. We thought by enforcing strict control, even on properties like yours, we could keep the neighborhood intact." The crowd murmured, some shocked, others angry. Daniel's mind raced. "So, your corruption was a front to keep the developer out?" Meredith nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but I admit it got out of hand. I didn't want to admit it before, because it seemed like admitting defeat." Daniel exhaled slowly, the tension breaking. He stepped forward and held out his hand. "We both wanted the same thing, to protect this place. But you lost sight of how." Meredith took it, shaking firmly. "We rebuild," Daniel said. "Not with bulldozers or threats, but with trust." Weeks later, Daniel and Meredith stood side by side. unveiling a community plan that balanced homeowner rights with responsible development. The pit in Daniel's yard was filled in, replaced by a small garden dedicated to resilience. The wedding was rescheduled, this time with Daniel's blessing, in the community park, open to all neighbors. As the music played and the couple exchanged vows, Daniel caught Chloe's eye. She smiled, genuine this time, and mouthed, "Thank you." The HOA's reign of fear had ended, but more importantly, a fractured neighborhood had found its way back to unity. And Daniel, he realized sometimes, demolition wasn't about destruction. It was about clearing the ground for something better.